Um, cool. So, firstly, I'd like to, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Andy Hamilton. I'm one of the senior coaches at Total Tri Training, and I've got the real privilege to spend some time tonight with Greg Whyte, who I'm going to introduce properly in a minute, and also his colleague as well from YouPerform, James, who we'll introduce later on in the call. So, firstly, I just want to say thanks to you, Greg, for taking the time. I've been really looking forward to this. As I said, I'm on holiday in Devon, so I've literally left the family doing their stuff so that I could come and take this call, but really appreciate your time. For those of you that have probably been stuck in a locked room or basement for the last 10 years, I thought I'd try very briefly to introduce Greg and his exploits in the world, really. So, Professor Greg Whyte, OBE, a European world medalist and Olympian modern pentathlete, PhD in exercise, sports science, human performance, considered to be probably one of the world's leading authorities on sports and exercise science, performance and endurance, both individually and team perspective. He's the Professor of Applied Sport and Exercise Science at Liverpool John Moores University, Director of Performance at the Centre for Health and Human Performance on Harley Street. And if that wasn't enough, he's coached and motivated, some very well-known people, including David Walliams with his Channel Swim and long-distance swimming events, Davina McCall, which I think we all fondly remember, that 506-mile ultra triathlon. I think you've taken 2 groups of celebrities up Kilimanjaro, is it twice?
Yeah.
And the one that I think we always wince at, which is Eddie Izzard's 27 marathons in 27 days. So in total, 23 sport relief challenges, and plus the stuff that you've done, a massive £45 million for charity. So I'm exhausted just reading that, and that's not.
So am I.
So, yeah. So it's an absolute honour and privilege, Greg, to be able to spend some time, and hopefully we're recording this and we're going to be able to send it out to the general public as well, to be able to kind of highlight the stuff that we're going to talk about. So I want to move on to you, and I know you've done a lot of these interviews and stuff over the time on podcasts and stuff, but for me, if it's okay, I'd like to try and build a little bit of a journey about you as a person, and how you became you, and how that journey has led you to where we are today, and what we're going to talk about today a little bit, and how you help athletes kind of both at all levels continually achieve. So how did you get into sport as a child? Did you have sporty parents? Was it school? Was it friends? And then how did that end up taking you on to the Olympics?
Well, actually, behind me, you can probably see a picture of a boxer.
Yeah,
that is not me. That's actually my dad. And my dad was, he was actually #1 light middleweight in England at the time. So a great boxer. And my mum, her brother played for Luton Town Football Club, the Mighty Hatters. But effectively what I had was, fundamentally what I had was exactly what every sporty kid requires when they're starting out, and that is supportive parents. I never had pushy parents. I just had supportive parents, and really they supported me in everything I wanted to do. And what a great start. I started off as a swimmer. I actually started, believe it or not, in those days there was no age limit. So I started off training at the age of 6. I remember competing in my first county championships at 6.
Wow.
And then I sort of, and that was great actually. I had my dad coaching me initially for that. And then I joined the squad at Luton. I won national championships at 11. And then of course what then happens is you get to sort of 14, and swimming is notorious for it, is that everybody gives up. All your mates leave. And to me, sport was always social. The reason I did sport is because it was my social circle. I used to go training because I saw my mates, not because of training really. But then luckily, and this is actually how I met James, I won't sort of go into detail that story, but in '76, Great Britain won the Olympic gold medal at the Montreal Olympic Games in modern pentathlon. And for a kid from Luton, I'm from born and brought up in Luton, a kid from Luton to do modern pentathlon's a fair rarity. There's not many of us. I think there's one of us. but it sort of became quite an interesting event. And so therefore at the age of sort of 14, 15, I then migrated into modern pentathlon. Fortunately, I had an aptitude for it, and then sort of developed it from there and went on from there.
And then how did you naturally take to it, and that kind of ended up, you were very good at it, and that kind of pushed you into the Olympic route? And was that a shock, or did you see it coming?
No, I think it's sort of one of my mantras in life. As you grow and as you age, I mean, I think it's about taking opportunity. I was presented with an opportunity. Modern pentathlon was such a brilliant sport, and akin to triathlon in many ways, but triathlon didn't exist at the time. And that is the sort of multi-event aspect to it works well for me, because I have struggled and concentrated on one thing at any one time. And so having 5 events, I mean, obviously the quid pro quo to that, much like it is with triathlon, what it meant was I was training somewhere in the region of about 17 sessions a week. It was about 40 hours. It was a full-time job training with modern pentathlon. But I had an aptitude. It went very, very well. I went to my first junior world championships when I was 18. And then from there, I made it onto the senior squad and won European bronze, world championship silver, and obviously went to the Olympics. So it was a fabulous, a fortuitous and fabulous career that I had in modern pentathlon.
Brilliant. It sounds amazing. And was 92, was that Barcelona?
Barcelona? Yeah. What an Olympics that was. Probably one. I mean, I would say it because I was there, but actually, I think one of the best. If you look at, interesting enough, the first Olympics I worked on, because I went on to become the director of research for the British Olympic Medical Centre. The first Olympics I worked on was Athens, and that was a fabulous games as well. A very successful games for the UK.
Yeah. Brilliant. So and again, I'm conscious of we might jump around a little bit, but kind of, so post Olympics, you're probably around what, 24, 25 at the time. You've done one of your first degrees, and then what was your world looking like at that point? Or did you already know what you wanted to do, or did you feel that your route in through the championships, the Olympics, being involved in that elite level sport, was that starting and obviously plus your head for academia, did that kind of start to think, oh, actually this is the career I want to go down? Or was this a sidestep later in life? How did that kind of work?
I think, they were interesting times around then. I think an awful lot of people sort of look at sport and they look at it through the lens of today. But if you imagine, lottery funding didn't come in until 1998. And so my entire career, I'd retired at that point. So my entire career was done without funding. And modern pentathlon is not a sport that attracts any funding. As well as having parents who worked incredibly hard to give me the opportunity that we had. I mean, to put it into context, I remember one of my first internationals, I had to pay to go on an international competition. I mean, that is, you say that today and people just look what's going on, and so the landscape changed. But at that time, you were either rich, which a lot of modern pentathletes were. You were either rich and so you didn't have to worry about it, or you worked or you studied. And for me, I've always tried to avoid work if I can. so I studied and quite a weird one as well. Often, I've done a few of these interviews when we talk about sports science, but you imagine I did sports science at a place called Borough Road in London, then later became the West London Institute of Higher Education. It then became Brunel University. But I started that degree in 1986. And at that time, I think there were 3 institutions in the UK that did sports science. And it was much like it was interesting with modern pentathlon, is that you say to people, I'm a modern pentathlete, and you always have to caveat that by explaining what that is. In the late 80s, early 90s, when you said to somebody, oh, I'm doing sports science, you would have to caveat that by explaining what people, what it was all about. And for me, the evolution of that now, everybody understands what a sports scientist does. They know what a physiologist is, a psychologist, a biomechanist. Whereas, when I started this undergraduate degree, it was a real punt it was a real, sort of stab in the dark in a sense, because nobody knew really what it was or what it would lead to. So I did that undergrad. That led into I did that undergrad, finished my degree, and as most people in sports science still do, sadly, is you come out of it and think, what am I going to do? So I did a PGCE. And then I taught for 2 years leading up to the '92 Olympics. And during that period, an opportunity came up in the US at the University of Maryland, actually a small school called Frostburg State University, to do a postgraduate degree, do a master's degree in human performance. And so I actually flew direct from Barcelona to the US to start a 2-year degree in human performance, which was just a magnificent experience. Wow. To do it out there.
Yeah, amazing. And the facilities have always been really kind of elite level, haven't they? Even at grassroots in the US, and was that?
Yeah. I mean, just on that, different games. So the school that I was at, University of Maryland, is Div 1. So they go down in divisions, and they're generally associated with size and money. But the school I went to was Div 3. And so it was Division 3, which is the sort of lowest of the divisions. But we had an indoor 400-meter track. We had strength and conditioning suites, which still surpass anything you see in the British system. We had indoor 25-meter pool, diving pit. The list goes on of what was available at a Division 3 school. And so it was a real eye opener. Actually, it was fantastic because I carried on training, but from a training perspective, literally everything was on my doorstep. Outdoor 400 track, indoor track, swimming pool, gymnasia, strength and conditioning, everything was there. And it's just, I think to some extent it showed the difference, because what the big difference between the US and the UK is that the US see sport as a flagship. And often you will go to a college, you'll go to a university based upon their prowess in sport. And because of that, how much money you pay to go to a school will be based upon how successful they are at sport. Whereas in the UK, and really still to this day in the UK, sport is fundamentally secondary and of far less importance because of the system that we run in the UK versus the US.
Yeah. So you did US, and then did you come straight back to the UK after that, or did you, again, how did you end up doing what you're doing? Going into the teaching and the kind of wanting to further your knowledge, but also share and impart that on other people.
Well, I think what's really interesting, actually, watching the football, and we all saw Ericsson from Denmark recently, who collapsed on the pitch, and he had an arrhythmic, what we call it is a sudden arrhythmic death syndrome. Actually, that is my specialist area. But it was interesting when I flew back from the US. I remember reading a paper. And again, I guess what comes out of my story as it goes on is about opportunity. And I remember coming back, and sadly, a young man called Daniel Yorif, who was actually Gabby Logan's brother, had died suddenly in his back garden. Just been signed for Everton FC. Died suddenly in his back garden of a disease called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is a heart muscle disorder. And at the bottom of this article, of interest, I had spent 2 years in the US looking at cardiac structure and function in athletes. And at the bottom of this article, it said, for more information, contact this particular charity, Cardiac Risk in the Young. So I took the opportunity, I gave them a call. I said who I was and what I was doing and what I was interested in. And then about 3 days later, I was in an office with a stunningly nice guy called Professor Bill McKenna, who was the world's leading authority on hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, detailing the PhD that I wanted to do around the area, which is jaw dropped, because the thing that I wanted to do was actually take hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients and exercise them to maximum. That had never been done before anywhere. Principally because if you've got that disease, the understanding is that if you exercise, you will die. And so it was quite a novel approach to it. But actually what that then led to is me doing my PhD at St George's Hospital Medical School in cardiac structure and function, in what's called physiology versus pathophysiology, so in health and disease, which was great. And then what that led on to, that sort of coincided with my retirement from sport. I actually went and taught at university for a couple of years, And then a job came up at the British Olympic Medical Centre as their first director of research. And so I became the British Olympic Association's first director of research and stayed there for 4 years. It was an interesting time. And then without boring you too much, from there, I then went on to set up the English Institute of Sport. And then from there, I went up to set the Irish Institute of Sport, and then took up an academic post at Liverpool John Moores following that. So it was an interesting journey as you go through that.
Yeah, and again, just that, I like the way it's always about opportunity, but that moment, like you said, you read that article about obviously Gabby Logan's brother, and how that then led you into essentially the stepping stone onto pretty much everything that you've done. It's amazing. I think that's probably quite a nice lead in then, I think, around your knowledge and experience of human performance and endurance sports. And probably for us, I think probably a little group of questions that we've got from some of our groups and our coaches around that before we go into the stuff later on. So probably for me is obviously with all the stuff that you've done with Sport Relief, and all this background that you've got, this massive brain full of amazing stuff, is one of the key things is around like motivation and how athletes stay motivated, through the roller coaster. Obviously for us, the focus being triathlon, but whether it's ultra marathons or ultra endurance events, and those dark moments in training or racing, or when case in point, when things are getting changed or cancelled, as we've seen in the last 18 months, is what's your take on motivation? Why are some people better at than others? Why do people get demotivated? And then probably your take on how to turn a negative into a positive potentially.
I mean, a big question, but I mean, I guess, I mean, I think, firstly, I think there are probably two things to remember. Number one is that motivation is fluid. I think, there is this idea that we know somebody who's always motivated. Not true. Motivation perturbates across time, and it does for everybody. And so I think accepting that there'll be variability in that motivation is a really important thing. But I think probably fundamentally the most important thing is to remember that motivation doesn't just appear. Motivation is constructed, and so I run this sort of this triumvirate. There are three things which I think are really important. I think, look, the first thing and the most important thing is actually driven by belief, and believing that you can achieve something, believing that you can deliver, is absolutely fundamental. And I think that really is where you start. And why is that? Because with that belief, what you then do is you then commit the resources that are required to achieve that goal. And in those resources, we are talking about time, we're talking about effort, we may be talking about finance. But fundamentally, what you do is you think, I can do this, and so therefore I'm going to give it my best shot. And of course, when you do that, and this is all in the backdrop of a well-structured program with short, medium, and long-term goals. But when you start to do that, what you start to do, because you've committed, you start to deliver on short-term goals. And so you have success at delivering on short-term goals. And what that success then drives, that success itself drives motivation. Because all of a sudden you start to get the rewards, and that's a really nice place to be. So all of a sudden you think, we're going in the right direction. And of course, what that drives, that motivation then drives belief, which is where we started, because now we've got a little bit of success and we think, actually, we really can do this. So then you keep plowing in the commitment into delivering that, and lo and behold, you get more success. And so what you are constantly doing is in a self-fulfilling way, is that you are driving belief, that drives commitment, that then drives motivation, which then plays back into this in the round. And of course, what that is structured on top of, though, critically, is a well-designed program with short, medium, and long-term goals. That, to my mind, they're probably the most important factors within this. And making sure, it's a throwaway comment, set goals, but making sure that they're the right goals, that you follow this, that there is an algorithm to which you follow about them being timely and achievable, and etc. Yeah. But if you get them right, what happens is that motivation follows. I think the mistake for people is one of two things. One is to assume that motivation will just spring out of thin air. As you wake up one morning and I am motivated. That's simply not how it works, number one. And then crucially, I think the thing is that what you've always got to be doing is actually, fall back on that programming, understand the programming, because there will be periods of time where actually you are a bit demotivated. It's natural that it perturbates, it's sinusoidal as we go through. And with that then comes with a good program. What you can do is you can tweak that program to ensure that you get back on the right path of that belief, commitment, motivation, and then you can start to build it again.
Yeah, I to be honest, I almost stopped forgetting I was doing the interviewing there, and then just listened to that answer. I was trying to make mental notes to give to my athletes or the athletes certainly within our at Total Try Training. I think
Yeah.
Leon, and you talked a little bit about mindset, and I know you've just covered that off, and mindset is obviously key in that belief, having that mindset of belief. Tony, I'm not sure what's happened with, you might just want to. With a mindset, you talked about goals, where do you stand on the you talked about achievable goals? Should goals be easily achievable, or is it okay to set a goal that sounds unachievable, but by heading for that you start achieving other things? Does that make sense?
That absolutely does. I think it's an interesting balance, and I think what to some extent what we're talking about now is experience, because I think what a good coach will give you is experience to understand you as an athlete. A good athlete who's got lots of years of experience behind them will understand what works for them and what a goal should be. But I think there's no doubt about it. I think that you have to be audacious in your goal setting. I think sometimes, because what you want to do is you want to see success and demonstrable success as quickly as possible, because it is that's going to drive it. And so I think being audacious is really important. I think equally, as well as being sort of audacious on that, I think you have to set those goals so that they are achievable. But what you want them to be is just achievable. That's what you're looking for. But it's sort of the holy grail. I mean, it's quite a difficult one. I think experience, and that's why having somebody looking after you as a coach is so important, because what they are able to do is look from the outside in. And again, with a well-structured program, what you can do is you can actually identify the weaknesses and the strengths within that, and so therefore it allows you to address the weaknesses whilst maintaining the strengths to optimize the delivery of success.
Yeah, totally. I mean, music to my ears, really. And for me, I do think that there is that tendency, isn't it, to almost set too easy goals, and then you've got to almost have something that's slightly out of reach. And that's probably actually quite a nice way to talk about, dare I say it, the F word, the failure, is when you've got a goal that's just achievable and you're getting failure along the journey to get to that potential success. How do you try and offset those failures? Do you because we all say you should embrace them because they are part of the journey, but does that come back to that kind of triangle of motivation, mindset, etc.?
Well, the first thing I'd say is no such thing as failure. I think the only failure is failing to learn. I think that's the key. And I think what's interesting about that, I mean, listen, this is not new information. Einstein coined this beautifully, and Einstein coined it by saying that stupidity is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so, and that's exactly what training is about. Is that if you aren't reaching your goals, doing exactly the same thing over and over again is not going to lead you to a position where you are going to achieve those goals. So you've either got to change the goal or you've got to change your training. And I think the key to that is that by being analytical, by having a program, number one, I still see athletes who have an incredibly haphazard approach to training. And of course, when it doesn't go well, when they don't achieve that goal, the question then comes, well, what went wrong? Because it's so haphazard, you have no idea. You've got no idea why it went wrong because there's so many moving parts. And so with the program, what the reason why you're being sort of interrogative of interrogate that program is that it enables you on not delivering on that goal. It enables you to go back and see what went wrong, why it went wrong, what needs to change, and therefore you then move forward positively. So I think it all comes back really to programming, and programming is absolutely key.
Yeah, and I think that's quite, again, just a nice way of changing the definition of what is success or failure, because it isn't necessarily binary, isn't it? It's not 0 or 1. It's very much reflective of what you're trying to achieve. And talking about things to achieve, I know that you've obviously been involved in lots of individual stuff, challenges, events, etc., but also helped teams, Olympic teams, etc., perform. Do you think that there is a different dynamic in team versus individual success? Do individuals make the team perform, or is there a team dynamic that you would never see at an individual level? Because we've seen that with COVID, with online training and Zwifting, and where you're almost getting a team dynamic in a very individual sport, which is triathlon. And what for you are those two differences, or are there crossovers, or are there none?
I mean, loads. I think the analogy, given that the Euros are on currently, the analogy is that a team is not built around one player. It's not built around the excellence of one. And I always love listening to the pundits who say, the incredible in midfield. Well, you can be as good as you like in midfield, but if your goal is crap, you're going to get absolutely annihilated. You've got no back four, And so it is built around the entire team. And I think certainly one of the things that it runs from both the sort of athletes, those people who are performing, but it also runs to the entire team itself. So if you imagine on, the one I always sort of talk about, we walked across the KZU desert. Well, do you know what? You can name any of them, but the first challenge I did with Sport Relief, it was me and David. That was it. And occasionally we had a cameraman and a soundie who used to follow us. That was it. So at maximum, there was 4 of us. By the time we got round to Divina, there was 42 people involved with that project.
Wow.
And of course, what then happens is that the team becomes integral to the performance, and the team dynamic and how that team operates is fundamentally important as well. So the first thing is about selection of that team. You have to make sure that what you're doing. So as an athlete, if you're looking for a coach, you're looking for a physiologist, you're looking for training partners, you have to select them appropriately. Make sure that they're the right people when you select them. But equally, once you've selected them, what you've then got to do is integrate them. You've got to make sure that both you can operate with them, as the coach, as the athlete-coach relationship, or whatever that is, but equally that they can actually operate together. Because it's great to have, the world's best physiologist, the world's best nutritionist, and the world's best coach. But if they hate each other and don't talk, and they're and it becomes counterproductive. So making sure that you integrate them, and then it's about making sure that they all perform, that they perform to your benefit. And I think the biggest error is that within a team dynamic, to my mind, what you're trying to do is optimize everybody's performance. You're trying to get everybody up to 100%, because it always sounds a bit trite, but you are only as strong as your weakest link. And if you think about it in a triathlon analogy, you wouldn't spend all of your time, on the technology for swimming and the technology for running, and not bother pumping up your tires. It only takes one small thing to destroy a performance. And I think when it comes to teams, what's absolutely crucial about teams is making sure that it's the selection, the integration, and the performance of that team, and making sure that what as the athlete, your job to some extent is to make sure that everybody around you is focused on exactly the same thing, and they are working as a unit to optimize your performance.
Yeah, and that's really important, I think. And it's been, certainly for us, I think we've seen our individual performances improve because the team itself is getting stronger and starting to work better, and again goes back to mindset and exactly that. But almost even your weakest one are supported by the power of the collective somewhat, in that regard. So and you touched on it, I think, with the move, from the David to Davina. with that amount of people. Always an interesting question that I sometimes like throw in is difficult personalities or difficult athletes. Not that I'm saying we have any, of course, but any hints or tips would be greatly appreciated.
I think, I would say the question that people ask me the most is who's the worst person to work with, and what you've coined it as is something slightly different, and I quite like that, because it is, to some extent, our job, as a coach, whatever terminology you want to use, but our job is to get the best out of the people that we work with, and so therefore I think what's absolutely fundamental to our work is to ensure that what we do is that we adapt our approach to optimize the performance of others. And I think sometimes this idea that what you can be is just, I'm the coach, I am always right, and we're going to do it this way, simply doesn't work when it comes to a team environment, firstly. But and when you look at things like sport relief, they are so disparate. They might be comedians, they might have a similar job, but their personalities, their background, what they're trying to achieve is so different than what you have to do. And interesting enough, on some of the big team challenges, so I think the £1 million cycle that we did from John O'Groats to Land's End, or the Kazut Desert, which was a 100-kilometer walk across the driest and hottest desert in Kenya. What you're trying to do is you're actually evolving your approach to each individual on a continual basis. This is not working with people week to week. This is working with people minute to minute, and how you motivate them, how you talk to them effectively has to change, and you have to evolve, and you have to adapt that. And so I think it's an interesting one, in the sense that the great thing about the sport relief guys is that, much like athletes, they are there because they want to be there. The one thing that is impossible, in my opinion, the one thing that's impossible to give to somebody is desire. You can't change desire. It's the only thing. So if they don't want to be there, and this, sometimes you see that in athletes, they just don't want to be there, and you simply can't change that, but you can change just about everything else. And I think once these guys commit to a project, not only are they committing, in sport relief terms, this David Williams swimming across the English Channel, the blue ribbon of open water events, one of the toughest swim on the planet, is that he has committed to that. But he's not only committed to the event, he's committed to the 20 to 30 hours a week of training in order to deliver that over what was 33 weeks with David. And so the commitment they give you tells you how their desire, how much they really, really want it. And then from there, you've got something to build and something to mold. And I think I've been lucky enough with sport relief and comic relief. I've actually worked on 32 challenges with over 70 celebrities. I haven't had one that didn't commit, that didn't desire for success. And I think that to me is a mark of who they are, and actually what they're trying to achieve.
And certainly for me, I think that's really eye-opening, because there's always that slightly cynical view of, they're doing it for exposure, or it's timing in their career. And the reality is it doesn't matter how, if you've got to want to walk across a desert or swim the channel or go up a mountain, it doesn't matter. And that exposure, that cynical view, would only get them so far, potentially, wouldn't it?
No, and it's interesting. People say it to me, they only do it to get on telly. It's like, no, they're already on telly. David Williams is the biggest selling children's author in the world. He sold more books than anybody else on the planet, and that includes Harry Potter. He's not there for the money, because they don't get paid, and he's not there for the exposure. He doesn't need it. Probably the best example of that is Davina. Davina does not need to be on telly, and yet she exposed herself to her greatest fear, and that was cold, open, deep water in Lake Windermere. When I first started working with her, she could just about make 25 meters. When we did the challenge, which was only 3 months later, we swam 2,500 meters across Lake Windermere in February. Water temperature was 5 degrees centigrade. You are not doing that to get on telly, let me tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing. I remember we all watched that, just going, this is brilliant, because I think there was a lot of certainly a lot of connections for a lot of people that were pushing their boundaries and seeing
Yeah.
that, and being okay to not be okay, in many ways as well. So
it was also just the interesting one about that. It was also the first time that a national newspaper said, "When will he kill a celebrity?"
Well, that almost goes back to your point about wanting to push people with heart problems to their maximum.
Exactly. There's something wrong with me.
Yeah, exactly. That's how you could start and end your career potentially. Yeah, exactly. So probably then I think the Davina collection is quite nice to move on really in terms of training and the stuff that we do all the time, and is I know one of the things that we noticed as well that you were doing a lot during lockdown, I think, was you were starting to do a lot more strength training, circuit-based training. What's your view on strength training generally as part of an endurance training plan? Do you know when and how often? And as we age, should we do more or more of the same, or should we do different exercises in different ways as we get older?
Well, the first thing is it's absolutely fundamental. Strength training, strength and power based training is fundamental to any training program without any shadow of doubt. And whether that's, and what you're trying to do is deliver one of two things. One is performance enhancement. The other, though, crucially, is actually about injury prevention. There is nothing more damaging to a training program than injury or illness. And obviously, when you're doing a sport like triathlon, the training volume is incredibly high. We know that the injuries are much more prevalent when you're fatigued, and let's face it, as a triathlete, you're constantly fatigued. But equally, that it's what we call linear endurance. So it's repetitive. We're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So what you do get is you get very localized fatigue, very small muscle fatigue, and so therefore the injury potential is high. So firstly, it is absolutely integral. I think if you add on top of that as we age, and we can talk about James. We'll talk with James about this. And one of the reasons why we developed the sports supplement range that we have is that what happens when we age is we naturally lose muscle mass. Now, that is accelerated, particularly for women postmenopausal. But for men, it occurs sort of circa the age of about 35, and we see this thing called the somatopause in men, where we start to see a fall in growth hormone secretion and testosterone, and we see a reduction in muscle mass. And that reduction in muscle mass leads to a reduction in strength, leads to a reduction in power. And always the interesting thing for me is that I'm yet to meet an athlete who didn't understand the importance of strength and power. And yet I've met quite a few who are afraid of doing strength and power training. And I think it's sort of somewhat incongruous. And I think actually as we age, it becomes far more important. And of course, with that aging process, with that falling muscle mass, we fatigue quicker. So therefore injury potential is much higher. And so therefore it becomes even more important as we age. So for age group triathletes, strength training is more important than it is for elite youngsters. So it definitely should be integrated in there. Do we do things slightly differently? Well, I tell you what we don't do is we don't change intensity. I think, again, people think as we age, what we should do is lift less weight. Absolutely not. We're still looking for 1 RM. We're still looking to we're talking about strength. And just a case in point, I think one of the fears, particularly in female athletes, is that what they're going to do is end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It is not, I can tell you it's not going to happen. But crucially for endurance athletes, what we call concomitant training is that what we know is that strength training alongside this huge volume of endurance training is that what it does is it blocks the hypertrophy process. So, and remember that strength is not solely about increasing muscle mass. We've got this, what we call neuromuscular gains. So in other words, what we do is we recruit muscle fibers in a more economic and more efficient pattern to increase or develop strength and develop power. So there are lots of strength gains that are going on without an increase in muscle size. And for endurance athletes, when you've got a concomitant high load of endurance training, you simply aren't going to put that muscle mass on, but you can still get much stronger and much more powerful.
Yeah, music to my ears from a coaching perspective. So perfect. So and I'm going to ask one more question before I think it would be really nice to get James involved and we talk about your stuff around You Perform and this brilliant kind of product range that you were co-founder of. So my last question is, it's a fairly selfish triathlete question, which is the Norseman, the pursuit of the black t-shirt. Why that race? What were your drivers for it? You know, and then I think probably nicely into the conversation we just had about age is, what did you do differently being a 50 plus athlete for that race that you wouldn't have done maybe if you were 25 or 30? And I suspect some of that's going to be strength, but you know, why that race? What were your motivators? And you know, what were those insights into your training leading up to it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess why the Norseman? I have this, so sort of every other year for the past 12, 14 years now, I've done a sport relief, comet relief challenge. And so in the in-between periods, I like to challenge myself to do something sort of personal. And I sort of picked up this penchant for the toughest, you know. So back in 2008, I did the Race Across America, which they call the toughest cycle race in the world. What an event that is. If anybody's thinking about that, that is something else. We did the four-man team race on that. I then did what they call the toughest foot race on the planet. We can, you know, debate whether these are the toughest or not, but that's what they advertise them at. So I did the MDS, did the Marathon des Sables, which was fab. And then the Norseman was sort of the natural progression from there, because it was the toughest triathlon on the planet as advertised. I guess what was handy as well is it linked in with my work with Hoob on that as well, because Hoob are the main sponsor of that particular event. And also, when you look at the Norseman, and it is scary.
Yeah.
And I tell you why it's particularly scary. People talk about jumping off the back of a ferry into a freezing cold fjord at 4:30 in the morning. That to me is like music to my ears. That bit I love. It's the bike course on that thing was just crazy. The first 55 kilometers out of the water was uphill. And at that point, that's when the real climbing started. And I am, as I said it in the film, you know, I mean, I am a swimmer on a bike. I am not made to sit on a bike, you know.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And I think, you know, what was the difference in my prep for that? I think one of the critical things that as you age, I think one of the key things that changes is recovery and recovery time. And I think what I spend an awful lot more time doing is being, and I think it's one of those things, you know, what do you do? Take an extra day off a week. It's not necessarily about that sort of just solely about, you know, taking time out of training. It's actually about optimizing your recovery every day, every session, you know, and that comes down to things like nutrition. Again, you know, we'll go into that in a second, but, you know, nutrition to optimize that recovery. It comes down to sleep quality, not just about sleep time, but sleep quality and making sure you get the right recovery. And so what I would say is that leading up to that Norseman, and to be honest with you, my proudest achievement of the Norseman was I was the only 50-year-old plus to get a black t-shirt that year. And I think that was sort of testament to the process of the program that led into it. But without any shadow of doubt, it was recovery that I was really focusing on, because with the right recovery, it means you can optimize the training stimulus, which means you get better.
Yeah, brilliant. And you know, how long was it before you took that black t-shirt off? Was it glued to you for a few weeks?
I've got it hanging on the wall. You can see it in the back there. I've got it hanging up on the wall. I daren't wear it in case I did damaged it, so I just chuck it straight on the wall.
Yeah, spill something down it. So I think perfect. Greg, look, I think the stuff that you talked about around is so useful for us, and I think it's a really nice lead into talking about the stuff that you're doing with YouPerform. So I want to say hi as well to James Greenwell, who's one of the co-founders of YouPerform as well. So hi,
good evening,
James.
guys.
I'm looking forward to you jumping in at this point. So you co-founded YouPerform. Products are using active collagen. So and it's very easy to do so. So treat me like a complete idiot, and you know, tell me why collagen, why is it important generally in our body, and why it gets more important potentially as we get older, and some of the stuff that we've talked about in terms of the aging process.
I think James's story about why collagen is probably, let's start there, James.
Yeah, cool. Well, as some of you might already competed on Team GB for a decade together at senior worlds, senior Europeans, and across the world. So competed with each other and against each other, which has been fantastic. It's led to a brilliant friendship. My background is obviously modern pentathlon. I still compete as an age grouper now, but the initial discovery of collagen happened back in 2003 when I was men's captain for the men's modern pentathlon team, training down at Bath University. And unfortunately, during a track session, I ruptured my right Achilles tendon. The doctors at Bath University basically said, that's game over. That's the end of your career because you're the grand old age of 31. And at that point in time, I turned to Greg, who just started to read about this incredible protein, collagen. And I became the first elite athlete in the world ever to trial it as a nutritional support to see if it would help my body recover. And it was literally groundbreaking to the point where they were predicting 12 weeks, 14 weeks before I could turn to basic rehabilitation and gentle training. And I was actually back in the pool, albeit very gently, and doing rehab training in 23 days. And off the back of that, it's led to a global empire in multiple different areas, from beauty to sport. But the key thing for me is I've always wanted, me and Greg always stayed really, really good friends. You know, when I've been competing over the last 6-7 years in the same federation, Modern Pentathlon Federation, in biathlon and triathlon, which is shoot and run, and then the full modern pentathlon. It's been Greg I've been turning to say, hey, how do I get the best out of my body? And I'm now the grand age of 49, but when I was 23. And the difference is recovery, support through nutrition, and adapting your training. So, you know, the collagen is key. It's a term that most people have heard of. They've read about it, you know, in glossy magazines and injections and maybe eye fillers and what have you, but don't actually understand what it actually is. And that's when it becomes groundbreaking. So this is the point in time in everyone listening to this this interview that had possibly heard the term, have no idea what it is, but this could be a sliding doors moment for you, because collagen is actually the largest naturally occurring protein in the human body, and it is abundant throughout the human body. Yeah, we understand that 90% of the protein of the skin is collagen, but what people don't understand is between 40 to 60% of the protein in our connective tissue, so your ligaments, your tendons, your muscles, and also including your cartilage, is actually the collagen protein. So it is the glue of the body, it's the scaffolding of the body, and it's the protein that actually works as the assist to many other functions in the body. Elastin, for example, supportive hyaluronic acid, which is your natural body lubricant. So without the collagen protein, you break down and you don't repair and you get injured. So by keeping the collagen level high in the body, you can sustain a much higher level of training, a much faster level of repair and recovery, and you can perform in the sport you love for a lot longer longevity. I think, Greg summarized it earlier, saying, even now I'm still putting in high intensity because I can, because I'm supporting the body. So, when we understand the role of collagen, and then the light bulb moment goes on when I'm going to tell you that you start depleting collagen in your body if you're active from as early as the age of 20 years old, and you're losing about 1.5% of your total body store per year, every year. So I don't know how the age group is of your training team here, but by the time you're 50, you've lost about 45% roughly. If you're female, you then go into the menopause where collagen depletion accelerates even faster those next 5 years. And the effects can be quite devastating. And where do we see it? We see it on the face, the lines, the wrinkles, changing facial structure, fingernails, but where can we feel it? We feel it on the muscles, and that's what we set out to do, is to make the best product in the world to address this issue.
No, brilliant. And that's a really thorough answer. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I suppose the next one then is, it's probably an easy question to answer. I think you talked about it. 2003, you started using it. I think we all know that the protein supplement and nutrition fields in sport is continually gathering pace. It's massive now. Obvious question: has this been done before? If not, why not? And should it have been? I suppose.
Well, from a point of view of a collagen protein, no, it's market leading. It's new, it's innovative, and we are first to market with this technology, utilizing these grades of collagen. Yeah, proteins have been around for many years, obviously, and we understand that, but collagen is actually quite new, and hydrolyzed collagen, which is edible collagen, has only been around since circa 2002, 2003. We are one of the first, if not the first, informed sport registered collagen, to myself and Greg, as competing athletes now, but former elites. That's absolutely paramount that it's informed sports tested. But the technology it's wonderful, because with my knowledge of collagen over the years and combined with Greg's expert position in physiology, we have created the best product.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it there, and obviously talking about protein supplements, nutrition, lots of athletes out there are taking stuff, these snake oil, whatever's going to work. Your stuff is all tested, it's totally safe to use in competition, because I think that's always a real plus, especially now, with age groupers getting tested, and you mentioned the informed sport program as well. So was that always going to be paramount to your product line?
I think that's one for Greg.
I mean, the answer is absolutely. I mean, I think a couple of things you always have to remember. I think, when it comes to supplementation, look, there has to be indication. Why are you taking it? And I think there's an awful lot of supplements out there which you sort of notionally you think, oh, that'll make a difference. But the question is, do you actually really need it? And I think that being informed about that, the key thing about collagen, as James has outlined, is the fact that actually we know that it depletes. It depletes on a sort of a fairly linear basis of about 1 to 1.5% per year. That then accelerates at menopause for women. So we know there is indication. Like the next thing is about evidence. Is there evidence to demonstrate that it actually has an impact, has an effect? And again, many supplements simply don't have that evidence. Collagen does. It's small because it's a new product, but it is growing, and it currently sits on the IOC consensus statement on nutrition. So it's got the right sort of evidence that are required. And then I think thirdly, it's about quality. One of the big problems that you've got with supplements is that the regulation around supplements is really relatively poor. And because of that, there are two things. Number one is, can you be sure that what it says on the tin is actually in the tin? And the answer to that is no. And then secondly, can you be sure that it's not contaminated? And to take sort of rewind this, I mean, I was with the British Olympic Medical Centre, director of research at the British Olympic Medical Centre in the early 2000s, when there were a spate of athletes who tested positive, and their defense was contaminated supplements. And so the IOC, we ran a big study, the IOC ran a big study and showed that around about 80% of supplements were contaminated. And off the back of that, I set up the first program with a company called HFL in Newmarket to test supplements for Team GB athletes. And certainly for me and James, I think there are two things around the testing that really matter. Well, number one is that what we want to do is we want to optimize the quality of the product. And in optimizing that quality of the product, we want to make sure that it isn't contaminated. Because what we deal with athletes across the board, from those that just compete occasionally all the way through to elite athletes. And it is as important for the once a year athlete as it is for the elite athlete, to ensure that they're taking it because it's indicated, they're taking it because there's evidence for it, and they're taking it because it's quality.
Yeah, no, yeah, again, I think that's something that, you know, I think we certainly need to get better, and especially with marketing and stuff, it's very easy to get misled, and I think that's really important. I just want to talk some specifics, if that's all right, a little bit about the product range. And so first question, and again, I'll ask you both ones. So, and again, I kind of got a bit into my nerd zone when I was reading the website, but different peptides in the collagen in different types of products, is that because it works in different ways specifically? And also, which is probably a question, is I noticed that it said bovine active collagen. Is that an issue potentially for, you know, plant-based, vegan, vegetarian athletes? And is that just, well, it is what it is? So they're the two questions: peptides, products, and bovine, if that makes sense.
Yep, easy answers. Start with the last one, bovine. The simple answer is that all the independent clinical studies that show really good, strong results are bovine collagen, not fish collagen. And the simple answer, the simple way to get your head around that is, we are mammals, we're warm blood, we have vertebrae, and fish are not. That's the simplistic DNA change in the profile. So, yeah, if you're looking in the beauty industry, a marine collagen product can potentially hydrate skin tissue, but that's the extent of it. Whereas what we're using is different peptides for different jobs that actually deliver the physiological change result we're looking for, actual repair. Well, I say different peptides for different jobs. I mean, most people understand peptide is amino acid chain. And what we understand is by changing the chain, by changing the peptide, we can optimize and target specific areas. So for new collagen production within the body, as collagen levels deplete because of the aging process, we're looking to start or kickstart the natural body's collagen production again, which is a benefit everywhere: skin, hair, nails, muscles, connective tissue, the whole lot. So we need a peptide called Verisol B. That's got the evidence of improving collagen production within the body by some 65% in just 2 months of ingestion. We look at something called Fortigel, which is an optimized collagen for type 2, for that's cartilage. And obviously, you know, wear and tear on cartilage is considerable when you're doing a high repeat sport, be it tennis or golf, running, swimming, cycling, anything that's considerably high repeat action. And then we use another peptide called Tenderfort, and this is really now targeted at the health and robustness of your muscles and your ligament tendon area, so that connective tissue. So there's 3 different peptides. What we've done with the active gels, which is our signature product, is combine the Verisol B, so that's the optimized type 1 collagen, with the Tenderfort, which is for your soft tissue, connective tissue, ligaments, muscles, and tendons. So that's in one formulation. We've supercharged that with the vitamins and minerals that we know reduce tiredness and fatigue. Also, the vitamins and minerals that supercharge the immune system and actually improve the immune system, plus instigate new collagen production within the body. We go in a slightly different route with our protein, which is the only protein powder on the marketplace, which is over an 80% whey source. But we've also put the collagen in there, which is the Fortigel, so targeted for the cartilage, the type 2, and also our pure tablets, the active collagen tablets. That's the type 2. So a little bit of a blend. It's horses for courses, but the key thing is, and I like to explain it in this way: if you're going to walk onto your golf course, you're not going to take a cricket bat. If you're going to go play cricket, you're not going to walk onto your match with a golf club. You know, get the right tool for the right job. And will you get benefit? Yes, you will. You'll get cross benefit from everything. But if I asked you, Andy, run 100 meters, and you rocked up onto your track trainers on, you're going to run a pretty good 100 meters. If I said now put racing flats on, you might go a little bit quicker because you're starting to optimize. But we all know that actually you need racing, sprinting, track spikes for the optimum performance. Yeah. And that's the easiest and simplest way of doing it. So you're going to get a cross benefit of all of them. But if you've got a specific ailment, maybe you've got joint health, joint pain, you're really struggling with the signs of the aging that you can feel, not the ones you can see. You need to go for that Fortigel collagen in the protein and in the tablets. But if it's longevity in the sport and recovery from injury, soft tissue, and actually you realize, like I realized at 49 years old, I'm getting older for my sport and I'm still pushing really hard. The active gels are the way forwards. They're the sort of the all-encompassing signature product that me and Greg spent a long time developing. And there's an awful lot of research and development and cost and understanding that's gone into those signature gels. Not just to make sure the technology is there, but the one thing that I'm guessing everyone's going to agree on here is, over your time in sport, I'm sure you've taken some energy gels, and I'm sure everyone's experienced them that taste quite vile. If you're going to take something on an ongoing basis, it has to taste good. Otherwise, it doesn't become habit forming, and you don't want to do it on a daily basis. What we've developed is a product that actually tastes great.
Yeah, certainly that. There's nothing worse that not only does it taste awful, but it tastes awful during a race, or when you've done 15 gels at 100 miles onto an Ironman or something, you get flavor fatigue. So that's music to my ears. I have a question, actually. I'm asking for a friend. If I take it, will my hair grow back?
The simple answer is no, but here's the interesting thing about Veritol B. There is some evidence about it that it will actually increase the diameter of hair follicle by up to 11%. So if you've got hair, it can make your hair look thicker. If you haven't got hair, tough.
Andy, sorry, mate.
Yeah. So basically, make the hair on my back look better.
Precisely.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, guys, I know we said we'd do 60 minutes, so we're a little bit over, and I know that you've been brilliant. You've given us 20% off code as well, which is Total Try 20 and Total Try SS sub for 10% off your existing subscriptions. But I absolutely loved it. I've loved this chat. I think it's been brilliant. James, thanks so much. I love your passion and your enthusiasm for it, and to have you two driving forces behind it, I think is a real winner. And certainly we've been really excited about our links to you and our relationship with you going forward. So Greg and James, look, we'll put the links in our media and stuff that we're going to send out with this, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved it. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your exceptionally busy lives to do it. Best of luck, Greg, with any future exploits, and both of you for You Perform. It's been a pleasure, and I'll wrap it up there if that's okay.
Listen, thanks very much for having us on, and I hope to see some of your guys at racing soon when it returns. It'll be great.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Look forward to it. Take care. See you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.